If you're running a business, there are 5 fundamental things every single business should have, including yours. And I'm going to walk you through these 5 essentials, which will help you to drive value and to achieve incredible results. Number 1 is to have a strategy that outlines the following. I call this the strategy blueprint. Number 1, your company's purpose. In other words, why you exist. Number 2, your principles. You may call them values. I like to talk about principles because principles are values in action, whatever you choose, right? Whatever vernacular, but principles is number 2. Number 3 is your company's strategic problem. I'm going to pause here real quick and emphasize this because it's really critical to understand what is the strategic problem of your company. Not problems. Don't reframe it to be your biggest opportunity. It's your problem. What is the biggest obstacle that is standing in the way of your company fulfilling its purpose and achieving its desired outcomes? Get really clear on that. That's number 3, defining your company's strategic problem. And then you have to explore your strategic options. And there's a 4-part quadrant with the customer at the very center of these 4 quadrants. Number 1 is your shared aspiration. What does winning look like for your company, for your customers, for your employees, for all your stakeholders? You have to get really clear on that with the strategic option. Next, you have to identify your market focus and position. In other words, where are you going to compete? What channels are you going to use? What customers are you going to go after, et cetera, et cetera. Then you're going to want to identify your competitive behavior. What is your generic strategy? Are you going to differentiate? Are you going to be a cost leader? Or are you going to pursue a focus strategy? And what activities are you going to leverage in order to strengthen your operating model? That's the 3rd part within this quadrant. And then the 4th part is your resources and returns. You have to identify, okay, what are our resources and returns and what is the upside of pursuing this particular option? And is it desirable? Is it practical? And is it economical? So that's how you identify your strategic options. With at the center is your ideal customer profile. Don't forget about your customer in this whole process of defining your strategy. And then once you identify that, you move on to the next component, which is defining your strategic statement, taking all this and putting it into a cohesive statement that can be communicated across all levels of your organization. And then lastly, you want to identify some key performance indicators, KPIs, which will help you to measure your operational and financial performance. So all those items go into a strategic blueprint. So having a strategic blueprint is really critical, and that's fundamental number 1. If you need help with this, if you want to learn how to build a strategy blueprint, you could go to coltivar.com. We have a free course. You could take it. There's no obligation. There's no gimmicks. There's no hooks. Just go take the course, learn how to build a strategy blueprint, because I want you to get to $1 million in profit and then scale beyond that. All right, so that's number 1. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is IARs, which I call initiatives, actions, and results. So you have your strategy, you've identified your KPIs, now you need to implement that strategy so you could drive performance. To implement the strategy, like I said, I use this framework called IARs, which stands for initiatives, actions, and results. So you define your 3 to 5 initiatives. Don't do more than that, because if you have 10 initiatives, you're going to be all over the place. But define your initiatives that you're going to pursue in order to bring about your strategy. Also in the process, define the actions that you're going to take in order to advance your initiatives, and then define how are you going to measure this. And those are your key results. Your key results help you to measure the effectiveness of your initiatives. So having IARs in place and having this system in place will help you to drive clarity, alignment, and accountability in your organization, and this will ultimately lead to profitability. Next, number 3 is you need success measures for every role. Okay, this is different from KPIs. I'm going to talk about KPIs in just a minute, but success measures are individually crafted so people understand what is expected of them in their roles. When I was the CFO of this company, I had over 40 people in my department, including multiple controllers. And I remember controllers would come to me and I would get so frustrated with them because they were dropping the ball. And that's when I decided to get very clear on the success measures for the role, because I was being too vague. It was my responsibility that they were dropping the ball because I wasn't mentoring them and I wasn't outlining the expectations. The same thing may be true in your business. That was true for me. So here's what I did. said, look, controllers, these are the 3 things I want you to focus on. Number 1, I want you to deliver financial statements on time and in a manner that will help people to make better decisions. Number 2, I want you to provide support to the business unit leaders and functional leaders so they can take this financial information and drive value in their business. And then number 3, I need you to remain compliant, right, with the transactions and all the things that we're doing so we don't get into trouble and we don't increase our risk. So when I defined these success measures for my team, I said, okay, this is what success means in your role and in your role and in your role. Then everybody's like, got it. Okay, now I can focus. But oftentimes we fall into the trap of creating these job descriptions where we list out all these things. All right, here are the 30 things you're responsible for. And they're like, okay, what's most important? Success measures bring clarity, right? So that's really important. Let's go back to KPIs. Key performance indicators can be assigned to individuals. And key performance indicators are really important because they track your operational and financial performance. What gets measured gets managed. And I can tell you, just by measuring things, you will improve performance. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So when I go in to turn around and grow a company, I immediately define their KPIs. I don't do this by entering in ChatGPT, what are the top 10 KPIs? Instead, I identify all the value drivers of the business by building out this value tree and doing a financial analysis. And when I do that, I can pinpoint exactly, okay, here are the 3 things we need to measure, right? Or 5 things, or whatever it may be. Then I identify these KPIs, I assign them to specific individuals, and guess what? They're responsible for updating their own numbers because when you own the numbers, you also own accountability and performance. All right, so KPIs are for measuring the overall operational and financial performance of the company, and success measures help individuals to understand what's expected of them in their role and what does success actually look like. All right, so that's number 3, really important. And having a tool to do all this is so helpful. When I was CFO of this large company, they were doing $1 billion a year in revenue. We had multiple subsidiaries, and then those subsidiaries had subsidiaries. And I was trying to manage all this through an Excel spreadsheet. Oh my gosh, it was a mess. I'd send an Excel spreadsheet to this business unit leader and say, hey, make your updates and send me back a new version, but change the file name. But then it got so complicated, and then I upgraded to Google Sheets, and I was like, wow, at least it's in real time. But then somebody would fat finger over my graph and it like blow up. That's when I decided to invest in my own software called Mative. So all the clients I work with get on Mative, all their KPIs, all their IRs, their entire strategy blueprint is in there, and it's like one place. So whatever tool you use, that's just an example for me, but whatever tool you use, make sure that it's solid, it's in real time, it can be shared across the organization, and it's just very compatible with driving execution. All right, number 4, every company needs to have financial statements. And at a minimum, they need to have the income statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of retained earnings. Extra credit or a bonus goes to companies that have the statement of cash flows, because the statement of cash flows is my favorite financial statement because it allows you to easily compute free cash flow, and free cash flow drives value and is the lifeblood of every business. So having these financial statements, and I would say having them close as quickly as possible. Some of the best companies could do it within a few days after month end. Other companies do it within 2 or 3 weeks. But if it's taking you 4 weeks, 5 weeks, a month and a half, 2 months to close the books, oh my gosh, your financials are going to be worthless. Sure, you may need them for taxes, but trying to make a decision on financials that are 2 months old is not super helpful. So having these financial statements in a very simplistic manner, that's the other key. Not with all these complicated accounts, all these lines, right? You just want to simplify it, have a collapsed version of the financials that you can share with financial leaders. And then educating these financial leaders on what do these financial statements mean, what's the story behind the numbers, is really, really important. So having a solid FinOps, like financial operations, is going to enable you to have really clean and timely financial statements. Which leads me to the 5th thing that every company needs to have, and that is the FSR, which stands for the Financial Strategy Review Meeting. So this is how it works. Once a month in my companies and the companies that I'm working with, we have an FSR. We have this Financial Strategy Review Meeting. In advance of the meeting, we send out the financials to the business unit leaders and functional leaders, all the people that are going to be attending this meeting. So they review it, they ask questions, they make corrections, they do all this in advance of the meeting. The last thing you want to do is show up to the meeting and say, oh, this income statement's not right. make a change here, because then trust goes out the door and everybody's going to be looking at the numbers. They're like, yep, this isn't even correct. You're going to lose everybody. So we send these out in advance. People review the financials, they make corrections, they show up to the meeting, and then they report on their numbers, right? It's not my job as a CFO to stand there and report line by line what everybody could read for themselves. So you want people to own their numbers. You have to empower them from a financial perspective. That's why I'm so passionate about boosting your financial IQ. So we do that, and then we bring in the strategy. And we say, okay, here are your financials, here's your strategy. Here are the 3 initiatives or 5 initiatives or 2 initiatives, whatever they may be, that you're pursuing. Here's your financial performance. Where do we need to make adjustments, right? Are we pursuing things over here? We're going to take on these certain actions, right? Remember IARs? We're going to pursue these actions that are going to drive costs. We need to put those costs in the forecast. Do we need to make adjustments? What do we need to do to drive better performance? That's what I'm constantly asking the team. In other words, I'm saying, what's working well and what's not working well? And what's standing in the way of 10xing your growth or whatever it may be? And you want to identify the constraints in these meetings. You also want to identify if your initiatives are off track, or maybe you need to make adjustments to your strategy. Now, this is where you need to be really careful, because if you're not performing well for 1 month, 2 months, or for a quarter or whatever it may be, the last thing you want to do is just throw out your strategy, right? Or get rid of your initiatives. Instead, it's a good time to just ask yourself and your team, hey, are we focused on the right things? And what do we need to modify to drive better results? Right? So those are the 5 things that I think every business should have. Whenever I go into a company to turn them around or to help them to grow, these are the 5 essentials every business must have when I'm working with them. So I thought I'd share these insider tips with you so you can make sure that you have them in your business as well. And I can tell you, when you have these things in place, you're going to drive incredible outcomes, and you're just going to increase the value of your firm. All right, that's all I have for you. And until next time, be sure to share and subscribe and take care of yourself. Cheers.